Hey everybody, Eric Brown, MOBO-Media, MOBO-Media. Hey, I'm recording from a unique place right now. I'm on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, middle of the Pacific. Waves are crazy, so the camera's shaking. It'll shake a little bit, but there's only so much I can do. The ship is going crazy. Waves have been pretty brutal out here. So what I want to speak to is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and that's suicide prevention. Suicide prevention. In my Air Force career, I actually ended up changing jobs from working with planes and fighter jets and everything else to helping people, to helping people in mental health. And one big component of mental health is suicide prevention. Suicides happen every day. They happen more than people think. Um, Suicides, they are preventable as long as the person who has suicidal ideation has a good support system. They let them know that they're going through these things. But oftentimes, the problem is the stigma associated with suicides. Certainly, suicides are frowned upon uh, in certain settings. Obviously, in the Bible, it says it's a no-no, and I don't say that in a way that I know the Bible or that I know um, anything that the Bible condones or doesn't condone. But I will tell you, suicide is something that it's real. It's real. I've I served 7, 8 years in the military as a suicide prevention coordinator at a couple of bases, which meant I was a guy that I had to keep the numbers of the folks that attempted suicides. I had to keep the numbers of the folks that completed suicides. If there was a suicide, I had to respond to the scene with a team of folks to figure out what happened. If there was a suicide and there were other folks involved, we would have to get those folks involved because they were traumatized and get them and try to make sure they were okay. Because to come across someone hanging or someone who's taking their own life, man, that man, it's gut wrenching. It's gut wrenching. And I'll never forget when I first went to Japan. When I first went to Japan in 2005, I hadn't been there, man, a week. I hadn't been there a week. I think I probably was there 3 days. I had just gotten to Japan, and it was right around New Year's. And out of respect for this individual and the family, I'm not going to go into too many details, but I'll hit the high points. So, long story short, everybody was during the holiday season. The military allows folks to, take some time off, visit families, whatever. They give you all this extra time off. Well, this one young man, obviously everybody's focused on just getting out of work and really just letting their hair down and just really just enjoying the holiday season. And long story short, right after Christmas, around New Year's, this one young man in a dormitory, an Air Force dormitory, for some reason they it was odd because they didn't see the guy. They hadn't seen him and no one heard about him or anything. So they got someone to go into his room. And I'll never forget speaking with the young lady because I had to speak to the young lady who found this individual. I never forget, man, how gut wrenching that was when she said she went into the room, and when you go into the front door, you can also see the bathroom door, like straight ahead. And as soon as she opened the front door, what she saw at the top of the bathroom door was a knot, a big knot. And she said something, and her spirit told her what was on the other side of that door. And yes, that young man, he took his own life and he hung himself in the bathroom. But the worst part about it was there were a lot of young folks within the dorms who were just in shock. And so when they were hearing about it, before the medical folks could even get there or anything, all these kids started converging on the rooms and seeing this. They didn't go to see it just to make a mockery of it. They went to see it to see, is this real? Did he did? And that must have been like 10 to 15 young folks that saw this. And so we had to get those 10 to 15 young folks, get them in some good counseling, group counseling, and talk it through. But it was not only painful for the young folks, it was painful for us who try to prevent these type situations. So suicides are real. Suicides are real also for veterans. For veterans, for a long time, I think the number for veterans was 22 veterans a day were killing themselves, and I will tell you that number is not. It hasn't changed. If anything, it's probably increased. with all the stresses and everything going on around the world. And one thing I've always thought of is 2020, and COVID and everybody locked down, and people had financial situations, people were losing hope, people were losing family members. It was a time when a lot of folks became addicted to drugs, prescription, and controlled substances, and you know, illegal substances. Oxycodone. All this type of stuff, man. And there were a lot of folks that lost their lives during 2020, not from COVID, but just from losing hope over what was going on. And I pray for anybody that that were impacted negatively during COVID. And that was everybody, really, everybody was impacted, but some were impacted more so than others. So, interesting thing for me as a veteran, I always wondered, and I'm sure the Department of Defense and the military folks will never release this data, but I'm wondering how many veterans committed suicide during that period in 2020. Because you got to keep in mind, a lot of veterans relied on things like medications and counseling, things like that, to deal with things like, trauma and some of the other uh, diagnosed conditions, psych conditions, psychological conditions, and things like that. And so they didn't have access to, a lot of them didn't have access to medications. They didn't have access to counselors. And, you know, man, I just pray and pray and pray every day. Um, I don't think I even want to know the number because I already know it's probably a high number. I never forget when I was state director of the state veteran cemeteries. Um, had four cemeteries. You got one in Abilene, one in Corpus Christi, one in Killeen, Texas, and one down near the border called Mission, Texas. Never forget, sitting in my office one day, I got a call from one of the gentlemen that worked for me in Abilene. And he called me, and his voice, man, I could already tell something was going on when he called me in the voice. He didn't sound the same. He said, and they always call me boss, which I never, I'm not that type of person. You call me boss, no. But they, out of respect, they say, boss, man. He said, I need to talk to you. He said, you're not going to believe the phone call I just got. And I'm like, man, what's going on, man? He said, man, I just got this is during 2020. He says, man, I just got a phone call from one of the local funeral homes. And I'm just in shock. And I said, what happened? He said, they have the bodies of five veterans in the funeral home, and every last one of them committed suicide. And that is a true story. That ripped me, that tore me up. That tore me up because you're talking one location. Albany is a small city. It's a small city. If there were five bodies sitting in a funeral home because of suicide in that small city, do the math. Do the math for larger cities in the whole U.S. and overseas and everything else. Do the math. Do the math. And it's always a tough subject for me to talk about, particularly since I've worked in the field. And even at some point in Japan, I had a job where if you're a higher ranking individual in the military or the Air Force, and you attempt suicide or something like that, well, they have to get you to some care. And overseas, you don't have the same type of care you would have stateside. What's called inpatient or high level of care. So if you're a high ranking, another high ranking person had to escort you from Japan over to the States. And that was one of my jobs. I did that probably 10, 15 times within a 3-year time span, 3, 4 year time span, which meant that I would have to get this individual. They'll get a plane over to our location, and I had to take this individual. And there were protocols that I had. I had a bag with me. Inside the bag were straps that if the individual, it's one thing to be suicidal, but some folks also believe that they're not going out alone. They're going to take somebody with them. So we had a emergency bag that we carried with us, and this bag had straps where we could tie the individual down if need be. We had medication in the bag, Ativan. Uh, we could pop them and put them out, things like that. We had to always keep eyes on the individual, um, not let them have access to weapons. Like literally, I have to sit next to the individual the whole time. And sometimes I would talk to the individuals, and you know, and just kind of let them know, man, that there's so much more life to live. That taking your life is just not the way to go, man. Always talk to somebody. I never forget this one high-ranking individual that I had to fly back from Japan to the States. He attempted suicide, and he, it was almost a completed suicide. The individual was in a vehicle. He had a lot of things going on. I think financial issues, marital issues, all types of stuff. And so what he did was he parked his vehicle somewhere where typically no one would go. He parked his vehicle. He took a hose from the tailpipe of the car. He rolled all the windows up in the car and he cracked the window just a little bit. He put the hose inside the car. He taped up when you put obviously with a window in the car, you put a hose in there. You can't close the window, but he taped it up and sealed it and cranked the car up and just sat there. So he was about ready to die of carbon monoxide poisoning. By the grace of God, I don't know how somebody actually walked by and saw this guy. Somebody happened to be in the area and walked by and saw what was going on and immediately went over there and burst out the window and called the local officials and got him to us. And so those are the type of things that I've had to respond to and try to support people with. I also would go around speaking to large numbers of people about suicide prevention and alternatives to suicide, such as seeking help. My job was to mitigate the stigma associated with suicides or seeking help in mental care. And when I say mitigate the stigma, there's this stigma about seeking mental help, and it's been that way in the military for a long time. But I think nowadays people are more accepting of the fact that there's nothing wrong with having issues, mental issues. The wrong part is not seeking help for those issues. So my job was to try to kill the stigma, to let everybody know, you come and see us if you need help. Forget the stigma, forget what people think about you. Because for a long time, man, I tell you, when I first came in, you went to mental health, something like that, that was a career killer. I want to be honest with you. You were marked, blackballed, what do you want to call it? And it was so wrong. It was so wrong. So, and the military is very guilty of that. But they've come a long way, and they understand that, for the military, losing a person to suicide also there's an impact to the mission. And when I say mission, I'm talking about the work of the military folks. There's impact to it when you lose a person like that. So military leadership started taking a more hands-on approach. They began to take it more seriously. They began to mandate that people go through periodic briefings and things like that ever so often because you never know. I remember briefing 500 people in front of me on suicide prevention and trying to reach out to that unknown person in the crowd who was thinking about it. And although there were 500 folks, if I could reach that one, I felt I'd done my job. So it's not an easy job. It's not for those that are quite sensitive to that type of thing. But my training is what carried me through all of it. And the fact that my love of people, I don't ever want to see anybody go through that. But there's always another way. There's always another way. Hey, with that, I'll end this. And once again, I'll say if there's anybody out there that you're going through some things, you're losing hope, and you're considering that, please, please, please know there's always another way. There's a lot of life to live, a lot of life to live, and life is precious. And hell, for me, but me personally, before I attempted suicide, hell, I'd get on a plane and go somewhere far away by myself and try to live a whole different life with no stress. Real talk. I'm talking leave everything behind. I don't give a damn because it's all about taking care of myself. But that's just me, and everybody thinks differently. But please support those that have suicidal ideations. Don't clown them. Don't take them out drinking after they're talking suicide. Wrong thing to do because alcohol and suicidal ideations don't mix. And don't play with suicides. Don't play around with suicide just to get attention because suicide is one of those things that people kind of they respond to emotionally when you say it. So for anyone out there that uses this in a negative way, some sort of emotional control thing, shame on you, because there are people out there that really need the help. And That's what my focus is. So if you're out there playing games like that, man, shame on you. Shame on you. But and I'm not saying everyone. I'm just saying I've had my experiences with that. With that, I'll end this, and I said I'll end this twice, but this is the last time. I will end this. There's always another way besides suicide, and just know that you are loved. You are a human being. You are a child of God. Y'all take care. This is Eric Brown, MOBO-Media. Bye bye.